Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzhak Ruvain speaking to you from south of Jerusalem, here in the Holy Land of Israel. Today is the 5th day of the month of Tammuz, 5785. It's July 1st, 2025. This coming Shabbat, we are reading Parashat Chukat in the book of Numbers, beginning with chapter 19, verse 1, and concluding chapter 22, verse 1. Last week, when we spoke, last Temple Talk, I'm trying to remember. I think we were still in a hot war with Iran. Perhaps it had just ended. President Trump called for a ceasefire, which has been honored since then. Why am I saying this? Because so much has happened in the past weeks that it's just playing with my mind. I don't know how to keep time anymore. Events that have happened, seismic, cosmic events, cataclysmic events, biblical events have happened over the past few weeks, and sort of parallel to our day-to-day lives, and it's just such a strange feeling. It feels like the Israel's surprise attack on Iran feels like it was ages ago, and it seems like we've been things have been quiet for so long, but they're not quiet at all. In fact, just last Friday morning, it was Shabbat morning, there was a siren all throughout the country. We all entered into safe rooms or into bomb shelters because of a missile sent from the Houthis from Yemen, which was eliminated even before it got into Israeli airspace. But it's a strange thing. It's a strange thing to be living 2 years now in a war that's not somewhere across the Atlantic, not somewhere across the globe, but right here in our land and in our neighborhood. I wish it upon no one to experience this, but it is very fascinating, very strange, and very, like I said when I opened, time bending. It's hard to keep track of the time. It's hard to place things. But those are the times we're living through, and they really are. I keep saying this, and I can't say it enough. We're living through prophetic times. We're living through the fulfillment of prophecy. Israel's return to the land, the ingathering of the exiled, and these wars that we're fighting, miracles that are happening, incredible miracles. I cannot stress, and everybody here in Israel realizes it. It doesn't matter whether you define yourself as observant, as religious, as a Torah Jew, as a secular Jew, even as an atheist. Everybody here is very, very cognizant, very aware of the miracles, and blessings and prayers and psalms are coming out of the mouths of the people you would least suspect. You wouldn't imagine it ever to happen, and it's sort of become the language that we're speaking here in Israel. Newscasters, will open the news broadcast or in the middle of the broadcast to say a prayer, to say a blessing. People are blessing one another. People are reaching out to one another. The side effects of war can be very beautiful. It can really be very beautiful, and we should have more of this in peacetime, which we have in peacetime as well. But I'm just saying that in these times of war and in times of tragedy, there's no denying the tragedies, the loss. Just last week we lost 7 soldiers in just a couple of days. I think even 10 soldiers. It's, again, I don't mean to belittle, but the time, everything is just so, for me, bewildering now. But without belittling the tragedy. Alongside tragedy, which we also, also acknowledge and weep over, we have miracles. And it's very compressed, and it's very intense, and it's exhausting, and at the same time invigorating. It gives you strength. It gives you strength, and it grounds you. It's I read and I see what's happening in other countries, and I see that many people simply aren't grounded. They're just not living in their feet aren't on the ground. They're living in a fantasy. I see what's going on in New York City. This person who was nominated by the Democratic Party to be their candidate for mayor, and he is snake oil salesman. He's a charlatan, and he's just selling people a total load of whatever, and people are buying it, and people are lining up behind him, people who should know better. And where's the reality here? So sometimes life comes along and strikes you so hard that it just really brings you right back to reality, right back to the ground, right back to the earth. And suddenly you're connected again. And suddenly you're seeing things as they really are, and not just some make-believe, I don't know what. So that's what's happening here in Israel. We are very much grounded, very much cognizant of what's on the line. We really can't afford to make mistakes, because despite our incredible successes and despite the blessings and miracles that Hashem has performed and is performing for us, we cannot lower our defenses for even a moment, because the war still rages on, and we still have a very difficult battle in Gaza. We still have hostages that we need to return, and we still have enemies that swear our destruction. Iran is down, but not out. And, Israel is not lowering our defenses one bit. We know that they will try to strike again, perhaps even more determined than ever now. So, this is the reality in which we live. It's not the only reality. The fact that we all are on the one hand, living the life that I've been describing, on the other hand, we're living our day-to-day lives and doing our day-to-day things, and going shopping, and going to the swimming pool, and getting our hair cut, and of course, celebrating, enjoying Shabbat every week. And this is the reality here. Like I said, it's very intense, it's very fascinating. If you step back and sort of take a third-person look, it's just amazing. But I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. This is where we need to be. This is where I need to be. This is where history is unfolding. This is where prophecy is happening before our very eyes. This coming Shabbat, this week, we're reading Parashat Chukat. And of course, Parashat Chukat opens with the commandment of the red heifer, the ashes of the red heifer. Why is it located here, of all places? For the past 3 weeks in the book of Numbers, we've been just reading about disaster after disaster, self-imposed disasters by the Israelites. First it was the complainers, and then it was the gossipers, and then it was the spies, and then it was Korach, and it's just been one bad thing after another. Now we're sort of getting a bit of a respite with 22 verses, all describing the incredible mitzvah, the commandment, the chok of Para Aduma, and in great detail, Shabbat, which we celebrate every week, in which observing Shabbat is a very intense and beautiful thing, but the Torah itself mentions very little about how to observe Shabbat. The written Torah, I should say, the oral Torah, our tradition passed on from generation to generation, fills in all the gaps. Don't worry about that. But as far as what's written in the 5 books in the Torah, very little. Don't set a fire. Don't do work. Shamor, keep the Shabbat. Zachor, remember the Shabbat. What do those things mean? Again, our oral tradition fills in. But other than that, the Torah doesn't really give us much of an idea. Recently we read about a man who was gathering things on Shabbat, gathering wood on Shabbat. He was punished. That's another thing you can't do, but that's about all that we're told. But the Para Aduma, we get very detailed description of every process, every step of the process of preparing the ashes of the red heifer. First, locating a red heifer that's kosher, that's fit to produce the ashes, and then producing the ashes and applying the ashes, and it's very, very much in detail. And let's read the first few verses in Hebrew, then in English. Chapter 19, verse 1. In the book of Numbers, Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe ve'el Aharon lemor Zot Hukat HaTorah asher tziva Hashem lemor deber el bnei Yisrael v'yikchu elecha para aduma tmima asher en bat mum asher lo ala alea ol ונתתם אותה אל אלעזר הכהן והוציא אותה אל מחוץ למחנה ושחט אותו לפניו. ולקח אלעזר הכהן מדמה באצבעו והיזה אל נוכח פני אוהל מועד מדמה 7 פעמים. Okay. Hashem spoke to Moshe and to Aaron, saying, this is the decree, chok. The actual form of the word here is Hukat, but it's from the word chok. This is the decree, we'll talk about that in a moment, of the Torah, which Hashem has commanded, saying, speak to the children of Israel, and they shall take to you a completely red cow, a red heifer, which is without blemish, and upon which a yoke has not come. You shall give it to Eleazar the Kohen. He shall take it out to the outside of the camp, and someone shall slaughter it in his presence. Eleazar the Kohen shall take some of its blood with his forefinger, and sprinkle some of its blood toward the front of the tent of meeting 7 times. Someone shall burn the cow before his eyes, its hide and its flesh, and its blood with its dung shall he burn. The Kohen shall take cedar wood, hyssop, and crimson thread, and he shall throw them into the burning of the cow. And so on and so forth. This is the description of the actual preparing of the ashes. And of course, as you are probably aware, we have a beautiful, beautiful painting that we often post on Facebook. It's also on our website, of course, of this exact happening, not in the desert, not in the wilderness, and not with the tabernacle, the Mishkan, but with the Mikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. And of course, you see the Kohanim preparing the ashes of the red heifer, standing on the Mount of Olives, directly east of the Temple Mount, and looking directly into the opening, the entrance of the temple sanctuary. That's how it was done. 9 times were the ashes prepared in history. First time by Moshe in the wilderness, Moshe, Aaron, Eleazar, and other Kohanim. And that was the first red heifer. Of course, the last time any ashes were produced was during the Second Temple period. And why so few red heifers? The ashes are used to purify people who are coming on the pilgrimages to the Holy Temple and need to enter into the temple courtyards, the inner courtyards, with their offerings. And so they need to be purified of the impurification of contact with a corpse, which is known in Hebrew as tameh met. And to become pure is to be tahor. So they need to be tahor. So every year, 3 times a year, the Kohanim will be very busy um, sprinkling the ashes on people in order to purify them. So how can so few heifers serve for be used for so long? And the answer is that the ashes are kept in an urn, and very few ashes need to be sprinkled into a container of pure waters, mayim chaim, living waters from the shiloach, from the spring at the lower end of the city of David. And then that needs to be sprinkled by dipping a sprig of hyssop into the water and just shaking it toward the people who need to be purified. A simple drop of that water will purify a person. So between the tiny amount needed to purify a person and the tiny amount of ashes needed to be put into the water, the ashes can last for a very, very long time. What's it all about? Well, it's a chok. And a chok is a certain type of a mitzvah, a certain type of commandment. And it is a commandment between Hashem and man, Hashem and Israel, as opposed to a commandment that's known in Hebrew as ben adam lachavero, between a human, a man, and his compatriot, let's say. For example, don't steal is a commandment between man and man. You don't take from another man, another person. And it's also quite understandable, quite logical, quite clear. If we allow people to steal other people's possessions, we're going to have chaos and violence. So that's a very logical commandment. Other commandments don't even posit a reason. For example, keeping kosher. Why do certain animals we are allowed to eat and certain animals we're not allowed to eat? Well, because God said so. That's the reason. And this is a great test of our loyalty to Hashem, of our adherence to His Torah, because we do something without even knowing why. I mean, we do it because we're commanded to do it, and that's the only reason we need. Yes, when it comes to kashrut, we can say, certain things are healthier, certain things perhaps, they show us, certain humane attitude toward what we eat, toward the animals that we eat. All those things are very beautiful, and they do reflect reality, but it's not the reason why Hashem gave us His commandment. And the ultimate commandment that is beyond our rational comprehension, beyond our intellect's ability to grasp a reason behind it or even how it works, is the para uduma, the red heifer, which is why it's referred to here as Hukat HaTorah. It's not it's the chok of the red heifer, but it's referred to as Hukat HaTorah, as if to say this is the preeminent chok of the Torah. This is the one that all the others kind of line up behind, because it's sort of inexplicable. And one of the inexplicable aspects of it is that the Kohen, who has to be pure in order to prepare the ashes and create the ashes, as a result of his doing that, he becomes impure. So why? How does that work? Well, there really is no explanation, but this is what God has commanded us, and so this is what we do. And so, yes, it is a real test of our fidelity to Hashem. Are we going to do it despite the fact that we don't really understand it? Fortunately, and perhaps maybe that's why we're given such detail as to how to do it, so that we know exactly what to do, how to create the ashes, how to apply the ashes, how it works. And that's enough to understand exactly why, how. It's beyond us. In fact, the whole subject of purity, why certain things render us impure, and we can grasp general concepts, but it's just the way it is. It's the way it's what Hashem has shared with us, what He's commanded. And again, all these things of impurity only really became reality, once the tabernacle was erected and the service began, then with the presence of Hashem in the tabernacle and later in the Holy Temple, this reality of purity and impurity becomes very, very tangible, very, very present. And today we're very distant from it because of the fact that we don't have the temple. Once the temple is rebuilt, again, these subjects are going to be right up there again, and we're going to have to be very observant of them. Of course, there are, the impurity of nida, of a menstrual woman is still something that's observed very, very, very strictly by observant Jews. And again, it's we can grasp concepts about it, but why exactly? But it's a very beautiful thing to observe. It's very meaningful, and it is the basis of family life amongst observant Jews, and really gives tremendous strength and structure and meaning and purpose to married life and to family life. So all these things that we don't understand, even if we don't understand, we do definitely understand what it does for us, how it embellishes our lives and gives our lives meaning. As you know, the Temple Institute is very, very involved now for many years in trying to create ashes of the red heifer. And I know that some people are already, getting impatient, and they're a bit frustrated, and maybe we're not serious. What's the matter? How difficult can it be? Valid. All those thoughts, all those feelings are valid, but it's not because we're not making every effort, and it's certainly not because we're not serious. We're very serious about it, and it's a very serious matter. There's a lot of halacha, a lot of rules and regulations which apply to it, which we have rabbis in the Temple Institute who have mastered the entire subject and know exactly what we're working with and what we're trying to achieve and how to achieve it. I will say that we do have Kohanim who are pure, who don't have tamei met, contamination and impurity due to contact with a corpse, and that's because they themselves were born in home births, so they never had any occasion to be in a hospital. And if you're in a hospital, you're in a building where there will be a dead body, and so there's this concept which is discussed in this Parashat Chukat and other places, that the wording used, the description used in the Torah itself is that if you're in a tent where there's a dead body, then you have imbued that, you have contracted that contamination, meaning if there's a roof over your head and you're in the same location as a corpse, then you become impure. So obviously, if you're in a hospital, there's a roof over your head, there's one building, and anybody in that building, if there's a corpse, which you have to kind of assume that there is. So if you've ever been in a hospital, you are tamei met. And of course, a Kohen will never enter into a cemetery, so he won't contract tum'ah from the cemetery. So we do have Kohanim who are viable, they're kosher to perform the creation of the ashes, and of course we are training them in how to do that. And as you know, we have heifers here which are there's always some discussion about it, but right now I would say we don't really have one that is viable, that is still a kosher candidate, meaning that they've grown hairs that are no longer red. Now, sometimes those hairs will fall out or something. Now, what people always ask, at what age? So, no younger than 2 years, and you can already perform the ceremony to create the ashes. 2 years, 3 years, but even older than that, it can be. They're still viable, but you don't want to wait because at any moment they could grow hairs that aren't red, and has more than one hair that's not red disqualifies the heifer. So yeah, so like I started to say, I understand that people, want progress on this. They want to know it's a big thing, and it's a huge step toward the renewal of the service in the Holy Temple. I must add that if we were to rebuild the Holy Temple or rebuild the altar, which is the first step that needs to be done to perform offerings, if we were to do that next week, we could still begin the performance of offerings even without the red heifer, because at a time when it's impossible without the red heifer to be purified, there are certain things that you can do. So it's not completely holding things up. But of course, if we were to able to achieve the ashes in the near future, then of course it would certainly expedite things greatly. Now, one reason why we keep so quiet about the progress is that there's a lot of opposition to the ashes of the red heifer. There's opposition, unfortunately, within the Jewish community here in Israel. Not everybody is excited about it. Some people, especially some secular people, are very much intimidated by it. They're intimidated by the idea of the temple, of offerings. They think that it's just going to create trouble and disaster. And so when they hear of progress, there's a big hue and a cry, and sometimes even measures taken to try to stop us. But I know that among the Christian world, there are many people who are very excited about it and impatient and want it to happen. Among the radical Islamic world, for example, Hamas, before October 7th, one of the things that they had on their list of reasons to slaughter, murder, rape, torture, violate human beings was the progress that was being made on the red heifer. Believe it or not, that's another thing that they are completely terrified of, a red heifer. So we, in order to be able to progress without interference, we do very intentionally maintain a very low profile and are very quiet about it. So don't mistake that for things not happening or for us not being fully involved. I must say that Rav Azariah Ariel, who is the son of the founder of the Temple Institute and the head of the Temple Institute's research department, this is more or less his full-time occupation. He studies, he publishes, he writes, he publishes all about the red heifer. He shares this information, his studies, with other important, prominent rabbis here in Israel in order to gain a consensus. And he's working full-time on this very, very, very important mission. And so when the time is right, when God decides the time is right, everything will fall into place. And since, on the one hand, the idea of there's plenty of red cows in the world, and red doesn't mean fire engine red. It doesn't mean barber shop pole red. It means earthen red. And so there's plenty. There's Angus, and there's all other types of breeds that are red, and there's thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of potential red heifer candidates all throughout the world. So it really shouldn't be difficult to find one, and we have found, as you know. But so what I'm trying to say is that when that's really not the issue. There are other issues that need to be worked out, and when the time is right, just like Hashem has performed so many other miracles for us. When the time is right, we will have a red heifer, and all the other aspects of creating the ashes will have fallen into place, and we will be able to do it and proceed from there. So don't despair, and don't lose your patience, and please don't think that we at the Temple Institute are anything less than totally serious and dedicated toward producing the ashes of the red heifer. Let's move on now into our reading. In the few minutes we have left, immediately after the description of the red heifer, we leave that subject completely and basically go back to what's been the narrative of the book of Numbers, and that's the trials and tribulations of Israel in the wilderness. But now we seem to have skipped ahead. Everything up till now happened in the first year and a half of the 40 years. Now we discover that we are in the final year of the 40 years. So what happened in those intervening 38 years, we're not told. Later on, we'll have a list. Be given a list of 42 stations, 42 locations which Israel encamped throughout those 40 years. And some we'll recognize because it happened in the first year and a half and happened in the last year. But other ones we won't recognize because it happened in the intervening years. But exactly what happened during those years, we don't know. Where things, obviously there was nothing that the Torah felt was deemed necessary to report. But right after the red heifer, we read this in chapter 20 of Numbers, verse 1. The entire community of the children of Israel arrived at the desert of Tzin in the first month. This is the first month of the 40th year. And the people stayed in Kadesh. Miriam died there and was buried there. So Miriam, the prophetess, the older sister of Moshe and Aaron, the sister who was a young woman, watched over her infant brother Moshe and made sure that he was safe when he was placed on the Nile, and made sure that the daughter of Pharaoh had someone to nurse the child, which was Miriam's own mother. And later on, of course, she comes back into the on stage when she, after the splitting of the Sea of Reeds and the crossing of the Sea of Reeds, she leads the women in song and dance, the song of the sea. And later on, of course, we read about her when she, this not long ago, when she and Aaron spoke Lashon Hara, spoke poorly of Moshe and were duly punished. But she dies, and the Rashi asks, why is the death of Miriam stated next to the passage of the Paraduma? And he writes, to tell you that just as sacrifices, offerings provide atonement, so does the death of the righteous atone. So this means that she was a righteous person, and in her death there was atonement. He also mentions Miriam died there. She also died with a divine kiss, as did Moshe and Aaron. But then he asks, why then does it not state about her, al pi Hashem, which by the mouth of Hashem, which we understand as a divine kiss? We read about that with Aaron, read about that with Moshe, but not with Miriam. And he answered, because such an expression would not be respectful toward Hashem. And I imagine what he means is that it wouldn't be tsanua, it wouldn't be modest because she's a woman. I hear the music. Wow, we're just getting started here. By the way, I need to mention that right after Miriam dies, of course, Aaron dies, of course. There's the whole catastrophe of the rock and the water. Maybe next week we'll catch up on that. Thanks for being with me. Temple Talk.